Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, as we investigate and break down the Muswell Hill murder, a serial killer from the United Kingdom. His real name is Dennis Andrew Nilsen, and he killed at least 12 people, but he claims he has more than that. All his murders were done between 1978 to 1983 in London, England. As always, let's dive deep into this. Born on November 23, 1945 to Elizabeth Duthie White and Olive Magnus McKeesham in Fresburg, Aberdeenshire, he was the second of 3 children. Duthie and Olive later adopted the last name Nilsen. The marriage between his parents was not great. His father did not take marriage life serious, as he spent most of his time with the Free Norwegian Forces. After the birth of their 3rd child, his mother began to think she had rushed to get married and didn't think it through. In 1948, they got a divorce. Nilsen was a quiet yet adventurous kid. His best childhood memory were picnics with his mom and siblings, and going on long walks with his grandfather. He was only 5 at the time, but every time he would go out with his grandfather to walk with him. Nilsen saw his grandfather as a great hero and protector, and if anything were to happen to him, he would be lost in life. His grandfather was a fisherman, and in 1951, his health started to decline rapidly. On October 31st, 1951, in the North Sea, Nilsen's grandfather died of a heart attack and his body was brought to shore for his family. In the following years after his grandfather's death, Andrew became very quiet and started to be by himself in the harbor where his grandfather would work at. He started to ignore all his family and avoid every affection they showed him. Sylvia, his sister, was the only person he would talk to, and he had the closest relationship with her in the family. After Andrew had a near-death incident where he almost drowned, his mother moved him and his siblings out of his grandmother's home, and they moved to a flat. His mother would later marry a builder named Andrew Scott, and they had 4 kids together, and later the family moved to the village of Streatham in 1955. In his puberty years, Andrew realized he was a homosexual, and was attracted to the friends he had. He wasn't able to tell anyone in his family or friends. His friends were also attracted to his sister, which made Andrew think if he sexually fondled his sister, those feelings would go away. He did fondle her, but those feelings did not go away. At age 14, Andrew found life in Streatham boring and lame, as he said, and joined the Army Cadet Force, and he would go to say that joining the Cadet Force was a savior for him. Nilsen's grades were above average, but not great, but he did graduate from the academy and started working at a canning factory. He would later enlist in the army, where he would train as a chef. After joining, he passed his catering exam and would go to serve the men in the army all over the United Kingdom for 11 years. His career ended on October 1972, and right after he would come home and would stay with his family. Upon returning home, he had a fight with his older brother Olive after he told his family that Andrew was a homosexual. After that, they never spoke again, and Andrew never spoke to anyone in his family ever again, just simple letters to his mom. Andrew moved to London, where he joined the Metropolitan Police, and on April 1973 graduated from the academy and became a junior constable. He did make a couple arrests, but nothing serious. He loved the police force, but he missed the comradeship of the army, which led him to drink alone in the evenings. Andrew started to visit gay pubs where he found someone to get in a relationship, but it ended really quick, which he came to the conclusion that his personal life was at the odds with his professional life. In December, he resigned from the police force and went to work at various jobs, until he landed a job finding employment for unskilled workers. He would go to become the executive officer of the firm. This is where the killing begins. 14-year-old Stephen Dean Holmes was last seen on his way home from a rock concert. Holmes encountered Nilsen in the Cricklewood Arms on the evening of December 29, before accepting an offer to drink alcohol with him at Melrose Avenue. The following morning, Nilsen strangled Holmes with a necktie until he was unconscious, before drowning him in a bucket of water. His body was to remain beneath Nilsen's floorboards for over 7 months, before being disposed of upon a bonfire, and Holmes was the only victim not to be dissected before disposal. Holmes' remains would not be identified until November 2006. 23-year-old Kenneth Ockenden, a Canadian student on a tour of Britain, Ockenden encountered Nilsen in a pub on December 3, 1979. He was escorted on a tour of London before agreeing to accompany Nilsen to his flat for a meal and further drinks. One of the few murder victims who was widely reported as a missing person. Ockenden was strangled with the cord of Nilsen's headphones as he listened to a vinyl record. Martin Duffy was a 16-year-old runaway from Birkenhead. On May 17, 1980, Nilsen encountered the youth at a London railway station, as he himself returned from a union conference in Southport. Nilsen strangled Duffy and drowned him in the kitchen sink, before bathing with the body. 2 days later, Duffy's body was placed beneath the floorboards. William Sutherland, a 26-year-old father of one originally from Edinburgh, who occasionally worked as a male prostitute, met Nilsen in a pub near Piccadilly Circus in August 1980. Nilsen could not recall precisely how he murdered Sutherland, other than he strangled Sutherland and he himself stood or knelt in front of the victim. In the morning, there was another dead body. Unidentified Jane Doe, September. All that Nilsen could remember about the fifth victim was that he was an Irish laborer with rough hands, who wore an old suit and jacket and whose age he estimated to be between 27 and 30. He had met this victim at Cricklewood Arms in late 1980. Nilsen later claimed to have fabricated this victim. Unidentified Jane Doe on October. Nilsen's sixth victim was described by his murderer as a slender male prostitute, approximately 5 feet 10 inches, who was aged between 20 and 30, and of either Filipino or Mexican descent. To Nilsen, this victim had a gypsy-like feature. Nilsen met this victim in the Salisbury Arms in October 1980. Unidentified Jane Doe, November. This victim was described as Nilsen as being an English vagrant in his 20s, whom he encountered sleeping in a doorway at the top of Charing Cross Road. He had a pale complexion and had several missing teeth. Nilsen and the youth took a taxi to Melrose Avenue. That evening, the victim was strangled to death as he slept. With his legs moving in a cycle in motion, he was strangled. Nilsen later stated he believed that the victim's life had been one of long suffering, and that the act of killing this victim had been easy as taking a candy from a baby. Unidentified Jane Doe, between November or December, was an English long-haired hippie aged between 25 and 30. Nilsen met him in the West End after the pubs had closed in November or December 1980. This victim's body was retained beneath the floorboards of the flat until Nilsen removed the corpse, cut it into 3 pieces, then replaced the dissected remains beneath the floorboards. He burned the corpse 1 year later. Nilsen was later to claim to have fabricated this victim. The 9th victim was described by Nilsen as an 18-year-old boy Blue-Eyed Scot, who wore a green tracksuit top and trainers. Nilsen met this victim in the Golden Lion pub in Soho in early January 1981, killed after partaking in a drinking contest with Nilsen at Melrose Avenue. The body of his victim was dissected on January 12. Murdered sometime in February 1981, Nilsen recalled little about this victim other than the fact he was originally from Belfast, was slim, approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, and was aged in his early 20s. He had encountered this victim somewhere in the West End after the pubs had closed. He was strangled with a tie, and his body was placed under the floorboards. Nilsen encountered his 11th victim, a muscular young English skinhead aged approximately 20 years old, at a food stall in Leicester Square in April 1981. He was lured to Nilsen's home with the promise of meal and alcohol. Nilsen recalled this victim he had a tattoo around his neck simply reading, "Cut here," and that he had boasted about how tough he was and how he would like to fight. Nilsen hung this victim's naked torso in the bedroom for 24 hours, before placing the body beneath the floorboards. Nilsen later claimed to have fabricated this victim. September 18, Malcolm Barlow, age 23, the final victim to be murdered at Melrose Avenue. Barlow was an orphan who had spent much of his life in care homes. Murdered after returning to Nilsen's home to thank him for having ensured he received medical attention the previous day. Prior to dissection, Barlow's body was stowed in a kitchen cupboard, as Nilsen had no further room beneath the floorboards by this time. March 1982, John Howitt, 23 years old, originally from High Wycombe. Howitt was the first victim to be murdered at Cranley Gardens. This was Nilsen's new flat. He was strangled as he slept in Nilsen's bed, with Nilsen shouting, "It's about time you went." As Howitt awoke to finding himself being strangled, eventually Nilsen drowned John Howitt by holding his head in the bathtub, filled with water for 5 minutes. Nilsen cut up Howitt's body, flushed portions of flesh and internal organs down the toilet, and placed various large bones out with the rubbish. In September, 27-year-old Graham Allen was a father of one. Originally from Motherwell, whom Nilsen encountered in Shaftesbury Avenue as Alan attempted to hail a taxi in September 1982. Alan was strangled with the ligature as he sat eating an omelet Nilsen had cooked for him. His body was identified from dental records and healed fractures to his jawbone. Dissected portions of flesh and small bones from the body of Alan blocked the drains at Cranley Gardens. January 20th, 1983, 20-year-old Stephen Sinclair, Nilsen's final victim. Sinclair was originally from Perth, Scotland at the time he encountered Nilsen. He was a heroin addict who suffered from the habit of self-harming. Nilsen encountered Sinclair in Oxford Street, where he first brought the youth a hamburger before suggesting that Sinclair accompany him to Cranley Gardens. After Sinclair had consumed alcohol, injected heroin, and Nilsen's flat, Nilsen strangled him to death with a ligature. The head, upper torso, and arms of Sinclair were stowed in the tea chest in Nilsen's living room. Sinclair's lower torso and legs were stowed beneath Nilsen's bathtub. Hiding all those remains in his apartment would lead Andrew to his fall. He had multiple neighbors report that the water was coming out weird in the sink. In further inspection by the supervisor in charge and a plumber, they found multiple small human bones and human flesh. They quickly called the police, who sent the bone samples to an anthropologist, who confirmed them to be human. After following the pipeline and seeing it came from the top floor, multiple neighbors pointed to Andrew saying he flushed them down. Police waited until Andrew got home and detained him. When they took him to the flat, they were greeted by foul odor. The detective chief inspector told Andrew, and I quote, "Okay, don't mess around. Where are they?" In which Andrew calmly replied, "They're in a plastic bag, inside the wardrobe." On his ride to the police station for further question, the chief investigator asked him if the remains were of 1 or 2 people. Andrew, looking out the window, answered, 15 or 16, since 1978. On February 10, at the police station, Andrew confessed to the whole murders. He was told if there was any more bodies, he told police where they could find more. Inside a tea chest in the living room and in an upturned drawer in the bathroom. Upon further investigation, they found more remains all over both the flats that Andrew stayed at. On February 11, 1983, Andrew Nilsen was charged for the murder of Stephen Sinclair. He was transferred to Brixton Prison. On October 24, 1983, Andrew was put on trial for 6 counts of attempted murder, where he pleaded not guilty. After a very short trial on November 3, 1983, Andrew was convicted of 6 counts of murder and 1 attempted murder, and he was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years imprisonment. Following his conviction, Andrew was transferred to Wormwood Scrubs Prison to begin his sentence as a Category A prisoner, which is a prisoner that is in high risk of being hurt. In December 1983, Andrew was attacked by a razor blade by a fellow inmate, Albert Moffat. Andrew had to get multiple stitches to cover the wounds in his face and chest. After the incident, Andrew bounced around prisons as a Category A prisoner, until in 1983, the Home Secretary changed Andrew's 25-year sentencing to life in prison, and was transferred back to his original prison, where he will remain as a Category A prisoner till his death. And just like that, Dennis Andrew Nilsen's case is closed. Thank you for joining me today as we investigated this serial killer, and don't forget to subscribe, and stay tuned for our next serial killer, and our next unsolved and haunted location. See you guys next time.